Say,
I think you were afraid to separate.
So we're gonna forgo the live stream.
Two projects being recorded, maybe that's finance and admissions building.
Let's do it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm now calling to order our May 26, 2022 meeting of the Lexington Planning Commission. It is 5:02 p.m. and we're in the Rockbridge County Administrative Office's first floor meeting room. Up next on our agenda is the approval of our agenda. I think now might be a good time to note and or invite any planning comments, particularly under new business item A. There is no planned public comment tonight, as we had decided previously. I guess now will be a last chance for any of our commissioners to decide to change and add a public comment there. Otherwise, members of the public would be able to speak on anything during the regular citizens comments section, which is number 4. So we're contemplating. We're also ready for a motion to approve this agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great, it is approved. Up next, we have approval of our minutes from our May 12th meeting. Once again, great job. Really appreciate the good work that went into that by staff.
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just commenting that I was not at the meeting, but I read the minutes and I also watched the live stream. So thank you for getting that. And yes, I'm going to still vote on it.
Awesome. Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Awesome. They are approved. Up next, we have item 4, citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda. And as I just mentioned, because there is no public comment for new business item A, that is the W&L master plan. Now would be your time to shine if you would like to speak on that or anything else. Alrighty, seeing no citizens coming forth, we'll now move on to number 5, new business item A, or actually, now would be a time to.
I'm going to recuse myself due to a perceived conflict of interest.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay, item A is CPA 2022-01, an application by Washington and Lee to amend the future land use designation for 12 Lee Avenue to be changed from downtown center to civic/campus/post. Also, RZ 2022-02, an application by Washington and Lee to rezone multiple properties owned by the university to the I-1 Institutional Overlay District, and MPA 2022-01, Washington and Lee Campus Master Plan Update. Arnie, would you like to get us started and let us know how we can best proceed?
Thank you and good evening to you all. As you recall, in the last 2 meetings, you've waded through the campus master plan, the rezonings, the comp plan amendment that's been requested. And you've basically gone through each of the capital project rezonings and comp plan item and made recommendations. And then asked specifically, because there were so many different recommendations over 2 meetings over a significant period of time, that we bring those back to you so that you can make your final motions and have the final motions written out for you, which is what we have provided to you on page 1 of this portion or page 10 of your overall packet. And again, you'll see the motion for the master plan and then the individual bulleted items, and then the same thing for the rezoning and the comp plan amendment that's been requested. Everything's been recommended for approval except for those items that are part and parcel of the museum / parking deck. And I believe we've listed everything appropriately or as you have made motions for each of those. And we certainly happy to make any corrections as needed. In the last few days, we've also had any questions before we keep? Okay.
I just want to make sure what's written in our notes is MPA 2202-02. Should that be an 01 on our page 1 of 1?
It's actually 02 because the first one that we had in February was the initial 01. And then when that was revised, significantly with additional MPA comp plan amendment and others, we renumbered it. So we've technically started over when we had that.
So on the agenda where it says MPA 2202-01, that should be an 02.
Correct.
Okay.
It's definitely
I-
02.
okay,
Sorry for
I
the
was just confused. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
So, and then in addition to what you have in your packet, there are also recommended changes for the sake of clarity that were provided to you, I believe, 2 days ago. And you also have that, I believe, on your places there. And in addition to that, we have another version, not just red and green. And I should clarify that the writing or suggested changes in red are from Mr. Contos. I had to make some additional edits, and those are in green with a couple of recommendations. And in addition to that, Commissioner Tuckler also provided a little while ago some suggested changes, and those are in all caps. So perhaps we should wade through the version that was the most recent that has the red, the green, and the all caps. And again, we're looking for the final motions. And most of what I think has been presented to you is really clarifications that are felt to be needed. But we do, just to clarify, the original version that's in your packet is really from your particular motions. So we wrote down what your motions were, recommend approval of this particular capital project as presented or as included or as proffered. And then anything beyond that is our recommended clarifications that some are deemed necessary. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Arnie. And just for the sake of process, I say we go through the changes, the red, green, and capital red prior to any emotions rather than trying to do it piecemeal. So with that said, I think we're ready to move on to commission discussion and decision.
Maybe I should lead off because I made some of the suggested changes and I don't know, they were mostly for clarity. If we go to bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the only that I had one question, which was, and subject to satisfactory review. That's always a confusing statement because who decides satisfactory? How do we, I don't know if there's a better way to say that. I mean, what does satisfactory review mean? Do we need to put more? I mean, I don't know that we can, but do we need to put more meat on that bone?
Staff would probably recommend that you don't, because again, that's confusing language. And what we're really trying to get at is the approval of the Mission and Financial Center as proffered. And then if we need to make some clarifications on what those proffers were, but the traffic study is going to come in and you're going to have a chance to review that. So I'm not sure that you need to necessarily say, because that's like saying upon the subject to the approval of a conditional use permit. Of course, the conditional use permit has to be approved. Otherwise, it's not going forward. So I'm hung up a little bit on the need for that subject to satisfactory review language.
Yeah, that was in there. So I was just clarifying that, what that meant. And so,
Sorry to interrupt. To me, it's implying our typical process for reviewing anything, right, Arnie?
yeah, that's fine. The next thing I put is traffic study that, and I wanted to lay out in detail, that a traffic studies necessarily, I didn't know this, what they include, what they involve, but there are specific concerns expressed by our commission about parking. and that parking as associated with the use of the admission financial center, I feel like that needs to be laid out because a parking study, I mean, a traffic study may include parking, but it has to account for the number of spaces that are going to be needed just to support those, the uses of those, all the people who are being admitted, or I feel like, and maybe that's not appropriate either. Just because that was a real serious concern that was expressed by this commission, and I feel like laying it out in a clearer way maybe is a better way, but I'm up to hearing what you say.
You're right, Matt.
Can you talk
Correct. I mean, you're right, Matt. We did talk about that. And I remember in our discussions, I was saying something to the effect of subject to the parking study, the admissions and financial center being, the parking would be accommodated properly. Maybe the way to do it, to pick up on your point, is then you say of the traffic study, including estimated parking demand. Somehow just to to make it clear that parking is included in the traffic study.
What if we said something along those lines? That we approve the admission of the financial center contingent upon the traffic study showing there is sufficient parking for this building or something like that.
My interpretation was that traffic study implied parking. So
That's mine.
I'm happy to make the additional distinction, but I don't think it's necessarily necessary.
And if I'm not mistaken, we had that discussion at our last meeting, and then I believe where we finally ended up, and we can check the minutes because it's in this packet, but I believe where we ended up was we were confident that WNL would not put in an admission financial center at the entrance to their campus without sufficient parking, because knowing full well that it would create them much bigger hassles than it would members of the public. I'm happy to continue along our discussion now about clarifying parking, but it will be taken care of in the traffic study and also likely in the site plan approval, because the site plan approval, you have to show that you have sufficient parking, even though that's a little bit harder to do on the WNL campus because you don't have parking right out front of the building as you do in most other cases. But between those two, I think we're comfortable in that the parking will have to be substantiated, that they have sufficient parking before a site plan approval can occur.
Yeah.
And that will include all the detail that you get with that traffic study.
Yeah, the only reason, I mean, that was answered explicitly. Does traffic study include parking? And also, yes, it does. The reason I want to put that in there is just from a public consumption standpoint, that I want people, this is a huge concern. If you go out there and you talk to people about traffic that could be created as a result. So in some ways, instead of assuming that everybody knows, that's just in the traffic study, it might be nice to be explicit about elements of the traffic study. That's why I was putting that in there, not to hold anybody's feet to the fire, but just so the public would know.
And that's certainly your ability to make these recommendations as you see fit with additional clarity if you want.
Matt, I think that's a good rationale, and I'm happy to include it. I do have a question. This could be a color code / all caps technical limitation. Contingent upon D has been crossed out. Was that crossing out a red, a blue, or a capital red?
I think that was the original. So I believe, and we're getting confused here, but approval of the admission and financial center contingent upon the.
So that was the original
Mhm.
wording. I think the new wording
Traffic
suggested by Mr.
study.
Contos is subject to the satisfactory review
Yeah.
of the
Mhm.
traffic study. And I think that maybe an easy thing on the study, to go back to Matt's point, the parking is contingent satisfactory review of a traffic study and related parking requirements. And that would take care of that.
How do you feel about that, Arnie?
Fine.
So can you read, so approval of admissions of financial centers with building height not to exceed 50 feet, a minimum setback of 34 feet to Washington Street and subject to satisfactory review of how, what was the wording that you had in there?
Of a traffic study or the traffic study and related parking requirements.
For the setback, does there need to be a setback on Lee, or is that,
My understanding is they're only offering the setback along Washington Street, which was in that proffer list that you saw last time in the blue. So it definitely said Washington Street.
okay. So, sorry, I'm gonna have to go back to
No, you're right.
what is the setback then on Lee? Since it's a corner building on the corner.
Depends on which frontage is the least frontage. So the one that has the smaller frontage is the front of the building, and the one that has the longer frontage is the side of the building. So that's how we have that listed. And our R1 zoning district has front setbacks of 15 and sides of 10. And I don't have a map of the property, so I cannot tell you at this time. My guess, and totally a guess, is the front is going to be along Washington and the side is going to be along Lee.
Okay.
But again, our corner lots, the front is the shortest distance.
Thanks, Arnie. I noticed Hugh was shaking his head. Perhaps you could, I don't like the word guess. Perhaps Hugh, if you want to confirm that that is the case.
Yes, we were using Washington Street as the front. And the main point of putting that in there is there was concern from the public about some of the green space and setback that we have on early fielding right now. And we wanted to get across as the new building going in its place is roughly in the same position as the existing building. We would not be losing those setbacks and green space that exists now.
Thank you. And name and address for the record as well.
I'm sorry, Hugh Latimer, 3020 Hemlock Road, Roanoke, Virginia. Thanks.
Thank you.
May I ask you a follow-up? Sorry, Hugh. Thank you. No, just following up on that. So does that mean on Lee Avenue? It would,
Yes, both. But as Arnie said, we had to determine what's the front street. And then we selected Washington Street because that was a little bit narrower, a little bit shorter.
For clarification, if I may, is the motion approval of the Mission and Financial Center with a building height not to exceed 50 feet, a minimum of 35 feet, a minimum setback of 35 feet to Washington Street,
34.
sorry, 34, and subject to satisfactory review of a traffic study and related parking requirements. Does it end there?
Well, then you can say, no, you keep going, provided by the applicant no later than. You can take out will be provided by. So subject to satisfactory review of a traffic study and related parking requirements that will be provided by the applicant no later than the submittal with a site plan review application.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
So-
Matt, you want to walk us down to your next suite of capitals?
Well, are we good with that, Arnie? So you're set with that? Yeah, I would just, and this is, I don't like the term withdrawal. I feel like we approve and then we deny. So I don't think it's appropriate for us to withdraw someone else's. We can say we deny it because that's not an action we can take. It's planning commission. So I feel like we need to, I mean, just to be consistent. And it's not, again, it's only for that. And basically, we're gonna deny. And the way when you put withdrawal, it feels it's
Why can't you recommend a withdrawal?
because we can't recommend, we're making a recommendation to the city council. The city council is not charged, we can't suggest that. So my statement denial of MPA is related to the Institutional History Museum and the proposed parking deck. And I want those both listed because those are two separate. I mean, they're related to each other, but there's two separate. And then at that point, just say the necessary consequence of this action by us is that the planning commission will deny any rezoning requests related to the Institutional History Museum or the parking deck, because such requests must be proceeded. And this is where I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. In order to give that zoning, to give that MPA, we have to have something before that, and we're not able to. We're gonna have to deny that next
I think
thing.
you can say you don't approve something at this time without saying you deny it. Cause I mean, I think that I think that some of the concern was, maybe there wasn't enough information at this time. Whereas I think a denial is very, I mean, I know it has somewhat of the same effect, but I think a denial is stronger than saying that we don't recommend it at this time. I mean, like you said, our job is to recommend or not recommend something. I mean, I don't think we have to say approve or deny. Our only choice is how we word something.
But we use approval throughout, and then not approval. And that gets a little tricky. Yeah,
I mean, I just think I don't.
and that's fine. I'm fine for that. I just think it's a little bit less.
I think,
Clear.
Arnie, could you, here it is, but you probably find it. What is under the institutional district zoning? What is the language that is there?
Are you referring to the section that says planning commission shall?
Yeah, action by the planning commission
Yeah.
shall approve the master plan after reviewing and other applications. Then we have to put it in writing. Master plan.
So it really just gets to, if you find the plan to be in compliance with all those things, then you shall make a recommendation for approval, but it doesn't say in the
I
opposite.
was just looking for language
Yeah.
if it was in here. but
I really
it's
think
not.
you can make the recommendation either way. I understand the point of you're either recommending approval or approval with conditions, or you're recommending denial. You can also say recommending denial with conditions because you're recommending denial based on there not being enough input or detail in this particular case. But I think the council will accept it either if it's a denial, or as we have had it in the, according to your original motion, that it's a withdrawal because there's not enough until there's additional detail. So I think they'll understand it either way. So whichever way you want to write it up. But ultimately, it's not recommending approval with this because there's not enough detail for the project at this time.
I'm comfortable with denial. I agree with Arnie. I think we can be as,
Yeah, I feel like I want city council to have the luxury of just being clear as to what we were saying. And if you think that not approval is better, it gives them more latitude, then that's fine too. If people are not responding, I just think denial is clearer, but it's not approval is a semantic difference. And so if you all want not approval, I just don't think withdrawal is appropriate.
Let me ask a procedural question. So let's say some of our concerns, like, I don't know if they have addressed the concerns in between this meeting and whenever they go before city council. But if our recommendation was say, to not approve it or to deny it or whatever, based on not enough information on traffic patterns and parking and when the parking deck is available to the public and what traffic patterns would be like based on that or whatever, right? If they had information that would address those concerns that they could tell city council, how would that be possible for city council to take that in consideration along with our recommendation?
There are two potential tacks to take in that particular instance. One, applicant makes a recommendation or changes their proposal based on what they've heard tonight on this particular item. We're talking museum parking deck. And they provide additional information or additional assurances or somehow change up their proposal for that capital project. And it's really up to council if they want to just take that and then base their public hearing comments and their ultimate decision on that. In some cases, if they believe that there's enough of a change from what you've seen and what they're seeing, and they want the planning commission to have additional review, or they want you to have that additional ability to review and comment for their benefit and make a new recommendation, they can send that part back to you.
And that, I mean, that's why I am thinking about this language about saying we don't approve at this time, because my vote and such was based on the information presented to us, which I felt like we didn't know what traffic patterns would be like. We didn't know when things would be open to the public, and that might, affect, if it's at 5 o'clock, ends at 5 o'clock, that could have a significant impact on traffic. I don't know. I mean, so I think the lack of information on that specific line item was my decision was based on that. And that's why I am thinking about the language of does not approve based on the information versus an outright denial. And that was my thinking personally.
If the city council gets the statement of denial, city council can do whatever they want. So if they get more information, this is recommendation. They could ignore us.
Well,
If they
that's
want,
true,
but-
but I mean, like the language of our recommendation or denial or whatever it is, I mean, I think it has some effect. I think if we said we deny it, we think it's a bad project, is different than saying we don't have enough sufficient information to, you know what I mean, make a decision based on this point.
Just looking back at the minutes from last meeting, the way that the motion was put forward was John Driscoll moved to recommend that the Institutional History Museum and parking deck be withdrawn from the campus master plan until additional detail is provided. So that's the motion that commission made last meeting. And that's what is reflected in Arnie's suggested motions today. So what's changed between the two? Like, I mean, it seems like you're just we're sort of just debating denial versus not approve. And I don't know. I feel like we can move forward with the path of least resistance, because they essentially the same thing, and city council is going to see the same thing.
What has changed is, I think Matt's observation, which I agree with, is recommending the applicant to withdraw something. It's not really within our purview.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually.
I think denial is just fine. I think council has access to these minutes and recordings. There's one been in the room every time. I think they'll understand the meaning behind denial or lack of approval, whatever term we use. So I'm not particularly concerned with the difference between denial and lack of approval. I think denial is more succinct. So that's my preference, but
What do you think, John?
I think the original language that I proposed that night was based on reading the zoning, institutional zoning, and the notion that WNL could proceed with a project, either if it was denied, then they could proceed with it in the future as an amendment to the campus master plan, or do it as a conditional use permit under existing regulations. So they had two options. I think the notion here was we don't know which option WNL would like to pursue in the future. So if our request was to withdraw it from consideration of this master plan.
So you're saying we're making a request of the applicant? Is that what you're saying? That's the part that I get stuck on.
Yeah, if you want to be clear and just say, I'm fine with denial, that's fine. And I think there's two issues. it's additional clarification on the parking and also the expansion of the institutional overlay zone across Lee Avenue. So those are two issues. So Arnie, could you weigh in a little bit on whether, again, what you think on the language? Because what we're going for is clarity, and as you've
Yeah.
said, Blake, it's not.
Yeah.
So what would you, based on our three different versions here, what would you think?
I think the first version, the original version, which you're with your original motion is sufficient. Now, if you just simply want to switch out, as Matt's suggesting, withdrawal for denial, so it'd be denial of master plan amendment as related to the Institutional History Museum and the proposed parking deck due to a lack of sufficient detail. I think that is more than enough for your motion. If you want to continue for clarifications, you could add that second sentence that Matt's proposed as far as the necessary consequences of this action. I believe that's already baked into the system, so it's not really needed, but if you want it for clarification, as you did on the first one,
Yeah, that's what
completely
I want.
understand. And then I just have to work through because and then do we just add in as the last sentence, the applicant can present this, because that's already in. And you could add that last sentence in, but I got to make sure that that doesn't conflict with Matt's second sentence. No, I think it doesn't. So it's up to you whether or not you want to have that third sentence in there that says the applicant can present this project as a separate conditional use permit under the existing C1 zoning.
I think that provides some clarity on the option.
Okay.
And also the city council will read this.
Is that where we are then, generally speaking, that it will be a denial of the master plan and amendment as related to the Institutional History Museum and the proposed parking deck due to a lack of sufficient detail? The necessary consequence of this action is that the planning commission will deny any rezoning request related to the Institutional History Museum or the parking deck because such a request must be preceded by a master plan amendment. The applicant can present this project as a separate conditional use permit under the existing C1 zoning.
So we're dropping what is after the semicolon after C1 zoning. And parentheses amendment not recommended, et cetera.
I lost you because the semicolon goes and then we go to the next one. So that green language, is that what your question is? No, that was just,
That's Arnie.
that's just me making a comment
Cool.
and not needing to be included in the motion, the language.
Perfect. Knowing that this is not our last opportunity to tweak this, Matt, you want to proceed to the next point?
Yeah, the next point is, it's something we don't have to deal with, and I don't even know why we have this in here, what we have before us is the notion that in the statement that you make is basically approval, no, it's which one is that? Yeah,
Either
neither
approval
approval nor denial of the softball field as its location is in Rockbridge County. I would say that we should never have been thinking about this. And it shouldn't really, that's a confusing point to put in the minutes. And so I would say that note that any previous comments by the commission regarding the proposed softball field on the WNL campus should be disregarded as its location in Rockbridge County makes it outside of this commission's jurisdiction. That I just as a reference, because we don't.
What if we
Well, it's
just say
still
that-
part of the master plan, which we're discussing. So
what if we just say that we express no opinion?
Okay.
I think that's the same as what Arnie said, neither approval nor denial of the softball field, et cetera. I think that's just fine.
I think if you're either leave it as is, or if you're intent on sort of making that point, maybe then the whole thing just goes away. that you're
I
not.
would be in favor
doing-
of the whole, I didn't know if, the reason I wrote this is because I didn't know if we could just make the whole thing go away, but I think making the whole thing go away as unnecessary filler for, I don't see as it being, having any relevance.
I think the relevance is it's part of the master plan, which in general was brought before us. So thus, any comments, even if the comment was, it is irrelevant, it's still a relevant comment. So I guess what I'm saying, I'm cool with Arnie's language.
I say keep the neither approve or denial. It's still part, as Jamie said, it's in the WNL master plan. And we just don't need to comment on it.
I agree.
Yeah, it's,
So that,
I mean, to be correct, there are the two housing projects on the back campus. One of them is in the county, one of them is in the city. What happened to that?
number 0.4,
So we are approving of either of the proposed back campus locations when one of them is not is in the county. So that should be amended.
yeah, approval of either of the proposed back campus locations for additional upper division housing within Lexington.
Well, there's only one.
There's only one, so it'd take out either. It's approval of the proposed back campus location for additional upper
Yeah.
division housing located in Lexington.
Do we for consistency, say we have no opinion on the second housing location? Or
Yeah.
do you just don't like that, Matt? Like,
I-
you seem
I
to be
guess
very upset about.
No,
that.
I'm not upset. I just think it's not necessary. I would just not, in my world, I just wouldn't want to include it because it's a distraction, because it has no relevance to us. It's not, it should not have any impact on any decision we're making. So why it's outside? I mean, I am happy to vote along with it. If you all want to keep it, that's cool. But just know that, just make it clear that we really have no say.
Well, if we say something about it, it shows that we looked at it, whereas if we don't say anything about it, I could say that we look like
Yeah.
we missed it.
I agree with Nick, and I agree with what John's proposed amendment to the language of 0.4. Arnie,
Okay, can you hit me again with that?
approval of the proposed back campus location for additional upper division housing in Lexington. Neither approval nor denial of the other location as it is in Rock Ridge County.
I like that. I think that's consistent.
So moving on to the last item in red on this page. Arnie is saying it is unnecessary as it is implied.
I believe that's pretty much self-evident in the code itself, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily helpful or needed.
So the only value could be the PR value, as Matt alluded to before, which I do see value in that. Any other thoughts on that red comment?
On this version.
Yes, the one that has green and red on it and capitals, the final point.
So if I'm not mistaken, that's the only one that's not tied to a capital project, not tied to a rezoning, not tied to a comp plan amendment. So it's more of a miscellaneous type recommendation.
Yeah, I agree with Arnie that it is unnecessary. What if we want to say it?
Yeah, I don't see that as necessary because I do. Yeah.
And also, someone could cynically infer or impute, are they synonyms? I don't know. Someone can cynically infer by making that last point that we don't always do that anyway. which we do, so. But that's pretty
Yeah, I'm
paranoid.
okay with taking it out. I don't imply that, Jamie. I think for clarity, it's not a bad statement. If you all feel it's redundant, I think we could take it out, but as you know, I've been a proponent of a more of a different review process where we have a chance to see things earlier. I feel that when we get things at a site plan process, it's a fait accompli. It's designed and finished. We have nothing to say except maybe move a tree. So, or a road. But if it says as provided by the city's ordinance, then I think we can take it out.
When you say it's fair, I think that's really interesting. When you say it's fait accompli, it's by state law that we're constrained by.
No, it's just the design process. I mean, the applicant, and this is not necessarily WNL, comes to us with a site approval, but the building everything has essentially been designed. There's been no opportunity for public input before that design is done. So we're essentially approving something that's already been designed. And so we can tweak it, but we can't say much about it. So it's a separate issue, Matt, for a longer discussion another time. And I know Arnie and I have discussed this and have different views on it.
I'm not sure it's helpful, but could I offer that particular bullet point that we're discussing, since it's not really in the master plan proposal or the rezoning to the comp plan, would you prefer to put that into a separate concluding sort of motion? Planning Commission further finds that in final project design, if final project designs do not comply with, so you would have a comp plan amendment motion. Without it, you would have your rezonings and master plan amendment as we're going through. Then you'd have your rezoning, then you'd have your comp plan amendment, and then a last one that says Planning Commission further finds that, and then that particular bullet point. That way you still have it, but it's sort of a little bit of a footnote.
I think that's a fair compromise.
I would be in favor of that.
I would tend to think that maybe we shouldn't put it in there. But I feel like if the process is that they can do that, then it just doesn't need to be stated. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of agree with Jamie's initial statement about like maybe somebody would look at it cynically and think that maybe there's some type of special treatment or something when it's really just a process for anybody. I mean, I guess if we started doing that for everybody, then we could do it. I don't know. I think less is more on this. And if that's just a process, that's just the process. I don't think we need to explicitly state that for this specific instance, if it's the general process for everybody.
I'm also cool with removing it.
It has to be consistent with the institutional overlaid language, doesn't it, Arnie? I mean, if we have this in here.
I'm not following. If you leave that in there in that particular location, you're saying that it has to be.
Well, what's different here, and actually I like the wording. Thank you, Tom, for what you provided us. But the problem is for individual projects prior to submitting site plan or building permit applications. So prior is the tricky part there. And I'm not, and
Is
what
that
would
language different from the prior, is that, your question is this by putting that prior in, does that maybe make us differentiate this from any other kind of, and that's, yeah.
It does, as provided in the city zoning ordinance, which is so broad. I don't think it's specific to institutional overlay necessarily.
I just think that we should be commenting on what was kind of brought before us. So if it's not, Arnie, you're saying it's not tied to any, is it, what were you saying about it wasn't tied to any of the requests? Did you say something like
No,
that?
well, I was talking about more about the location of this comment in where it now is resides with master plan amendments. I
Yeah.
think that was my comment. So
So,
if,
so your recommendation is if we did keep it, we could put it within the motion. As much as I like it, I would go along with it, with taking it out at the moment. And then we can go back and revisit the topic.
I mean, I do think this is a much bigger topic that you bring up, and I think that it's something that we need to think about, but
So I'm gonna endeavor to gather consensus on this one, and we will remove it. The final motion.
so do you recommend that we vote on this and then the next one, and then, or should we go through all this and vote on this?
what I would recommend is you continue what you're doing, but over on the next page, the final 2 points that go along with the master plan, make sure that you have those straight. And then the same thing with the rezoning and the comp plan amendment. And then because the rezoning is dependent on the comp plan amendment, I recommend that you start first with your motion for the comp plan amendment, which is denial in this particular case, and then do the rezonings, how, if you want to break them down or take them as a group, and then make your way back to the master plan amendment as the last thing. Because again, the master plan amendment is contingent on the rezonings and the denial of in this particular case, the comp plan amendment.
Sorry,
Reverse order.
can I get clarification on the second page? This approval is made with the following conditions. Item 2, the master plan amendment does not authorize the exterior alteration of buildings, structures, or properties. Is that, what about demolition? Is that considered demolition? Like, because aren't a lot of these buildings in this master plan amendment consider like buildings will be demolished and that's exterior alteration, or is that not the same thing?
I believe the intent of this, and this was pulled forward from the last campus master plan approval for WNL, that if we have properties that are in the historic district, that just because there's an approval in the master plan or indication that a building should come down, that doesn't mean it automatically, this master plan amendment approval doesn't automatically authorize the exterior alteration of a building, meaning either demolition or in the historic district, any exterior improvements. Both of those things have to go to the architectural review board. So I think this is just reserving the rights of the architectural review board in cases of demolition and alteration or new construction.
Okay. I got you.
Just to clarify, point 1 on that same page, the uses and layout of the subject properties shall be in substantial compliance. I think I brought this up before, but would you mind defining substantial for us for the record?
It could be wide ranging in this particular case, but as an example, the Williams building expansion, that building is shown on this particular campus master plan as having a significant setback from West Washington Street. If they submit a site plan and it's close to Washington Street, then that's not substantial compliance. And they would have to come back either master plan amendment or conditional use permit to make that change before we go through and do an approval of the next step. And in that particular case, the next step would be the site plan, which mind you is tied also with the traffic analysis.
Got it. So in other words, substantial is up to the discretion of the planning commission in their subsequent steps. Oh,
And at least initially by your zoning administrator.
thank you.
And which of those steps that come through us are just ministerial on our point that you just have to approve? That if they meet these requirements,
Site plan.
so this gives us, if there's variance from this plan, that gives us as a site plan saying, no, you can't, we aren't required to just approve it because it's been substantially modified. What is this doing for us?
It's tying the development that's proposed to what is shown specifically on the campus master plan. So the buildings, and then except for those instances where they've asked for additional height, because so they have a couple of lot sizes and building standards that have been amended or requested to be amended. But this is tying you to what you see. So what you see for W&L is what they get if that's the way it's approved. And any substantial change, again, if it's a footprint moving or if it's a use changing, it was just designated as the Williams School classroom office building, and it changes to something else completely. Dining hall, something else, and just another complete use. And that's not substantial compliance with the plan. It would have to come back to you. You would not actually see the site plan for something that's substantially different because staff should be catching it, telling the applicant that they cannot submit a complete site plan with it that way, that it needs to have an amendment, be it a conditional use permit or a master plan amendment. One other minor thing just to mention, this is more of a note for staff. It says in substantial compliance with the campus master plan by Sasaki date stamp March 18th, 2020 as amended. And we wanted to be specific on what that amendment was. And the amendment is what you see in the proffers, but they also submitted 6 pages of new drawings. And the 6 pages are pages 80 to 85. But since you are recommending denial, withdrawal of the parking deck and museum, the pages 80 to 83 included new drawings for the parking deck and museum building. So when it comes back, I presume that council is going to make an approval or recommendation slightly different. So we just have to put back in revised pages 80 through 85, but that's just a minor point to make.
Arnie, what travels to forward after tonight and you've raised that. So just to know, clarify what goes forward.
Your recommendation will go into a nice recommendation page.
So that's
A clean version of
a
that.
clean version of that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then what council will get ultimately is a new staff report. It's not going to have as much of the history, so it's going to be what we have up until now, but it's also going to include all the public comments and at least 3 sets of minutes from your meetings. So there's going to be a pretty full record, at least in my opinion, on what your discussions have been, how much public input you've had to come to that recommendation.
And you said that the final version will be 80 through 85 or will be 84 through 85 because we're saying we don't need 80 through 83.
Well,
Is that what you're saying? What,
Final version, sorry to confuse it maybe, but the final version, if council approves the parking deck and museum in some form or fashion, that will have to include pages 80 through 83 because that's what was shown. But your recommendation is not for that. So I've got to cut out those 4 pages in your recommendation.
These discussions typically conclude with a motion or 2.
If we could
well,
go on.
we
to
want
the-
to go on to do the next 2 steps and
Yeah,
then go
rezoning
backwards.
and
Yeah.
comp plan amendment to make sure that those are straight and then reverse order. Please.
So we're starting with C.
Are you comfortable with the rezoning and comp plan amendment motions that are before you?
Walk us through them one more time so we're clear, Arnie.
The rezoning motions, in my opinion, are housekeeping. You're asked to rezone 4 properties along West Washington Street that have been part of the campus for years, if not decades, and certainly considered part of campus, but for some reason we cannot determine that they were ever included in the institutional overlay. So that is, again, a housekeeping measure, at least in staff's opinion. And then the second one is the one for 12 Lee Avenue, the pit, the hole, whatever you want to call it, that you have recommended withdrawal / denial. Or actually denial, because that's what we landed on.
It's denial because it's the rezoning. If I'm reading that correctly.
So then the comp plan amendment, if we're going to move forward, is also the recommendation of denial because, again, that's for the property that is the pit or the hole. So if you're not recommending approval of that particular project, the capital project, which is the museum / parking deck, then you would therefore not recommend approval of the comp plan amendment for 12 Lee Avenue or the rezoning of 12 Lee Avenue.
And you say that's where we should start. We should start at, okay.
As an example, the master plan amendment is dependent on, the rezoning is dependent on, so I would definitely start with the comp plan amendment for your motions.
So I move to recommend denial of the request to amend the comprehensive plan to change the future land use designation for 12 Lee Avenue.
Thank you, Matt.
Second,
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
aye.
All opposed? Unanimously. Unanimous recommendation.
In regard to an application by W&L Washington Lee to rezone multiple properties owned by the university to I-1 institutional overlay, I move to recommend approval of the rezoning of 220, 218, and 216 West Washington Street, as well as one unaddressed adjacent parcel and the eastern portion of 223 McLaughlin Street to the I-1 institutional overlay district.
Second,
He wasn't done.
One at a time.
that's one at a time.
Oh, we're doing that separately?
Can.
Cool. Sorry.
He said
Further
it.
discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Great.
Okay, I move to recommend denial of the request to rezone 12 Lee Avenue to the I-1 institutional overlay.
Second,
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Another unanimous recommendation. So for this next one, item A. Is anyone willing to read through everything?
I feel like we need a clean copy. I would be happy to read through it, but I feel the wording, we need to know what the wording is. And if you have, I don't know that I've taken good enough notes for that.
We could go, as an idea, we could go item by item, because some of them we don't need to reword. And the ones where the wording needs to be clarified, we can clarify and then go.
I think that's a good idea.
Does anyone want to get us started?
I move to approve the partial conversion of the Leyburn Library to a teaching and learning center.
Second? Do we have a second?
Oh, second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Great.
I move to approve the expansion of the Science Center and IQ Center.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed?
I move to recommend the approval of renovations of Elrod Commons in addition to the dining facilities.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I move to approve the proposed back campus location for additional upper.
Oh, this is one of the ones.
Yeah,
that-
this-
You're
Yeah.
saying it right.
Got it.
You saying it right.
I th-
I got it
oh,
right.
I'm sorry.
Maybe. Check me.
I apologize.
Check me,
I
check me,
apologize.
check me. Approval.
Sorry about that.
I move to approve the proposed back campus location for additional upper division housing located in the city of Lexington.
Okay. Second.
Wait a second.
I thought-
Neither approval nor denial.
Neither approval nor denial of the softball. No, neither approval or denials, apologies. Neither approval or denial.
Of
The upper
second.
campus of the upper division housing location within Rockbridge.
Okay,
It is
Is recommended.
is recommended. Yeah.
second.
You can't second your own motion.
All right.
Can we
Do you have that clear? If you have that, then I'll second it.
Could we
could
have
you read
Arnie
it
read
back?
it back to us, please?
I believe it's approval of the proposed back campus locations for additional upper campus housing in Lexington, in the city of Lexington. Neither approval or denial of the upper division housing in Rockbridge County is recommended.
I think it's that we approve approve of the Lexington. Could you read that one more time, Marnie?
I believe it's approval of the proposed back campus locations for additional upper division housing in Lexington. Neither,
Is recommended.
That's approval.
Yeah.
Approval. Yeah. Okay.
and then neither approval or denial of the upper division housing located in Rockbridge County is recommended.
I'd just make one correction that you use the plural version of locations at the very front sentence. So just to clarify that it's not plural.
And the final recommended is, you say neither approval nor denial is recommended.
Yeah, I think we can remove the
just said-
final, we can make it actually one sentence. So John, how about you withdraw your previous motion so we
I
can,
completely withdraw my previous motion.
You deny it.
okay. I move to approve the proposed campus location for additional upper division housing in Lexington and neither approval nor denial for the location in Rockbridge County.
Second.
Further discussion?
Done.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I move to approve of the new pedestrian bridge over Woods Creek.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I'm gonna abstain again. Do I have to do that? Or I kind of, I abstained the first time, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and stay with the abstention on that one.
Okay, up next, I move to approve the admissions and financial aid center or financial center with a building height not to exceed 50 feet, a minimum setback of 34 feet to Washington Street, and subject to satisfactory review of traffic and related parking requirements no later than submittal with a site plan review application.
Slight modification. Just traffic study and related parking requirements. That's-
Great. So I move to approve the admissions and financial center with a building height not to exceed 50 feet, a minimum setback of 34 feet to Washington Street, and subject to satisfactory review of a traffic study and related parking requirements will be provided by the applicant no later than submittal with a site plan review application.
Second.
Further discussion?
I'm sorry, who was the second?
John. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Great.
Approval of the Williams, I move to approval of the Williams School expansion with the building height not to exceed 54 feet.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Great.
Approval, I move to approve for the approval of the Wilson Hall expansion, subject to maintaining a 25-foot yard setback.
Front yard setback.
Did you say-
Second,
You forgot, you didn't say the word front. You said yard, not front yard.
Okay. I move, apologies. I move for the approval of the Wilson Hall expansion, subject to maintaining a 25-foot front yard setback. Thank you.
second,
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Maybe the next one, Arnie could read us from his notes,
Good luck.
and then one of us could say we.
I thought we circled back on that, not changing it. Basically, it's fully agreeing with what Matt had said.
but we had, we included in there that the pros parking deck due to the lack of sufficient information, right? Isn't that what we had? That was, is that correct? Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, you did.
I thought we changed withdrawal to denial, kept your second sentence. I'm remembering what Arnie was saying and following that. And kept the third sentence, the applicant can present. That's why I was thinking, Arnie, if you could read it once to us, and then one of us could take it as a motion.
Okay. I'm glad that Matt clarified because I'd forgotten about that one little part because I hadn't written it down. But I believe the motion is denial of the master plan amendment as related to the Institutional History Museum and the proposed parking deck due to a lack of sufficient detail. The necessary consequence of this action is that the planning commission will deny any rezoning request related to the Institutional History Museum or the parking deck because such a request must be preceded by a master plan amendment. The applicant can present this project as a separate conditional use permit under the existing C1 zoning.
Like to take this one?
I will move to accept Arnie's, how do I do that as a motion? I make a motion to accept the text as noted by Arnie.
Second,
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I move to recommend neither approval nor denial of the softball field as its location is in Rock Ridge County. Second. Further discussion? All in favor?
aye,
Aye. All opposed?
I'm sorry, who was the second on that? I'm sorry.
Nick,
Thank you.
So Arnie, do you need a motion? Oh, the approval is made with the following conditions.
Yes, please.
I make a motion that this approval is made with the following conditions. One, the uses and layout of the subject property shall be in substantial compliance with the campus master plan by Sasaki, date stamped March 18th, 2022, as amended with revised pages Is this right? 84 to 85, and with the campus master plan proffer statement submitted on May 4th, 2022. And item 2, do we have to do these separately or can be all one motion?
Can go one.
Okay. Item 2, this master plan amendment does not authorize the exterior alteration of buildings, structures, or properties.
I just have a real quick question. So it is 84 to 85 and not 80 to 85. I know yours. Okay. Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Great. Great work, y'all. Really appreciate it. That was rigorous and very thoughtful over the past few months. So many thanks to staff, citizens, and planning commission. So back to our agenda, we will now move on to item B under new business. COA 2021-04, annual zoning ordinance amendments, plan unit development tonight. Arnie, would you like to get us started and let us know how we can be most helpful to you?
Could you give maybe a time period and maybe discuss quickly how much more time you want to spend? You still have a couple other minor or smaller items at the end. So just how much more time would you like to spend this session on PUDs?
Open to ideas.
15 minutes.
Perfect.
Oh, thank you.
Is 15 minutes, is that considered a round number? Or is it 14 or? Yeah, okay.
Doesn't matter. We're doing it in 15 minutes.
15 minutes, a quarter, yeah. Quarter.
What we've provided to you this evening, starting on page 11. You asked at the end of the last meeting for some decision points. This is at least a starter list for your decision points and things that you've seen before, such as should it be an overlay? Should it be a base zoning district? And then I believe the direction was at the last meeting, in addition, asking for additional height of buildings that exist there to sort of round out your height. And that was really difficult for us to find. So we're still going to have to work on that a bit. So we're a little bit deficient. And I was hoping that we'd have more information for you, but it's been hard to pull. So in addition to those two things, I believe your direction was to use the existing ordinance and that we should go through the existing PUD sections and to see how we can potentially modify them and still hit our decision points, which I'm just going to read them quickly. What are the purposes and intent of the proposed PUD? What will PUDs be? Where will PUDs be allowed and encouraged? Should the proposed PUD be as of right or a conditional? Should the proposed PUD be an overlay or a base zoning district? Should the proposed PUD require a concept plan or a highly detailed development plan? What will be the minimum acreage, maximum height, the open space requirement, if any, and then parking requirements. One thing that we've done, because in the last discussion, there was sort of a direction to work on the intent section. So kind of scratched through what we have for intent in those first two paragraphs and then pulled something from a couple of different places. And just to read that, well, maybe not quickly, but proposed now, of course, for your discretion, and please change it as you see fit. The purpose of the planned development mixed use district, and again, it doesn't have to be called mixed use district, but whatever you like to call it, is to promote areas appropriate for office, retail, and residential uses, designed in a unified and cohesive manner in order to create an attractive environment in which to live, work, and recreate. Two or more uses shall be integrated into a mixed-use project. The district is appropriate in areas suitable for redevelopment, such as the opportunity areas identified within the comprehensive plan, and will provide a process and design criteria that can be used to transition from established uses while accommodating new growth and evolving market trends. And I sort of jammed two sentences together there, so it might be a little bit long. And the last one, vertical integration of uses is encouraged where appropriate, and a PDMU is expected to produce a better design than can be produced through a traditional zoning, through traditional zoning. So a couple of items there. There was a comment at the last, and when I say the last meeting, I mean the last meeting that we actually discussed PUDs, about having a little bit more emphasis on the vertical mixed use. And maybe there's not enough here, but I definitely remember that comment. And then also this expectation, I believe there was desire to keep that in, that the PD or PUD that we're going to create should be providing a better design than can be produced through the regular zoning districts that we have. So try to pull forward those items. Then we can discuss if you want to go through the intent or if you just want.
Can I just ask you a
15
question?
minutes
Because
to go
I'm
through
still unclear. When you say PUD mixed use, that's also PUD dash MU. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry, I'm
And
pulling
then,
from.
and then PD, it's when you have on page 2, it says PD dash MU, that should be PUD.
Depends
I just
on
want
what you want to call it. And I'm pulling from a couple different things and that's why it's not consistent. So
I
we
just,
can-
wait, I just want to be clear as to what you meant,
Mhm.
that
Right.
I'm seeing. That's
It's-
correct. That's fine.
It's supposed to be the same thing, but
what I
again, just
thought.
pulling from, and it kind of depends on what you want to call it. Do you want to call it a PUD and we're only going to have one? Or do you want to call it a PUD mixed use just for commercial? Maybe we might have a PUD sort of for residential in the future. So it depends on how you want to.
I was just looking really for clarification, not venturing a proposal. I just.
Yeah, but I was gonna bring up that point. I do like the idea of let's start out with PUD, MU, and then we can decide after we go through this, does it apply to residential and maybe tweak it to that? But I think if we start down one path, instead of taking it too big, trying to do two things at one time, that was just my thought.
I agree with Leslie. My other thought, the final sentence, vertical integration, et cetera. What do y'all think about changing that to vertical combination instead? When I hear vertical integration, I think of something totally different.
Mm,
What was your suggestion?
Vertical combination,
Combination.
Accommodation.
AC?
combination,
Combination.
COMB.
Oh. Okay, I thought, yeah. Could
Maybe
sort of work.
add physical in there, vertical, physical integration. I can see what you're saying, and that's true. Vertical integration is different, but I was seeing it how Arnie said, I don't know if maybe add physical in there. Because you were saying accommodation?
No, combination, so
Combination.
vertical combination as opposed to,
OMB.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
as
Actually,
opposed
that's
to-
fine. Yeah, right. Okay. Vertical combination.
So getting to Leslie's point, you are saying in terms of definitions, maybe we don't want this to be a PUD. I was really trying to clarify as opposed to define terms, because you're then going to go forward and say on page 17, well, now let's look at a totally different PUD approach. It's called a mixed use district. And that could also be our PUD, right? Is that what you were introducing there? Or am I jumping too far, too
no,
quickly?
there aren't two different things that we're working on. We're still working on one thing, whatever we want to call it. It's up in the generic sense is the plan unit development where we're going to provide integration of mixed uses, and it's going to be a little bit different than what we have in our traditional zoning. So the first section that we're working through is our existing code, and we're sort of jumped back to that. And on 17 is the Henrico sort of version that we were making our way through, but then
Okay.
there was a suggestion that we've sort of focused back, and after
Okay.
we've learned some things, can we make our existing code work? So those aren't two different, they're two different things, but they're not intended to be
Yeah.
one PUD and then another PUD for a different purpose, if that's the question.
And I really liked how this was going, using the way you revised our current PUD. I thought that was a great intro paragraph and
Yeah.
explaining it, and I like going down this path.
That's the definition. So that's
Um,
PUD.
Yeah.
One suggestion on the introduction, and I don't have a specific sentence, but I'm just reflecting on the comp plan. How do we put in the statement or some, reflect on maintain the historic character of Lexington? I'm not quite sure how to do it, but something along that line. And so that's just a suggestion.
Could that potentially be in the character development, which is the next section?
It could be, Arnie.
And that actually might just depend where it is.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think depending where it is, historic district, definitely. Somewhere else, maybe not.
To clarify, I think we're talking at this point about our opportunity areas, which are our
Outside, yeah.
C2 zoning districts. And we have the map on the back for your background information. So everything out sort of East Nelson and down South Main. And then there's still the question, because East Lexington Bluffs area is also an opportunity area. If we're talking about that or not, is still somewhat of a question. But we're definitely not talking about downtown at this point that I'm aware of. So again, focusing on our C2 zoning districts out East Lex, out East Nelson, sorry, and down South Main. East.
Yeah, I don't have the answer, Leslie, and I agree. I mean, if we're talking about South Lexington, it might be different, or even along the
John?
60 corridor.
Talking to your mic.
Can you speak into your microphone? Otherwise, I won't be able to hear you when I'm listening to the audio. Thank you.
Sometimes that's a
Thank you.
good thing.
Thank you.
But wherever we do put something like that, I think I agree with Arnie, it should go in the character of development section.
There are no additional comments, and then you have plenty of time to come back to the intent section in the future. The other things that were changed, and we can certainly go through the character of development if you're ready to go through that, but just to highlight some of the other changes that are in red on page 13, open space. There was a suggestion that we get rid of the first three and sort of focus on D and E more. And I don't recall if we had anything else. And that's it as far as changes from.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
go ahead.
Going back though to the previous page under 420-5.2, it's saying after it lists the characteristics, and then it says of the plan, the characteristics of the planned unit development as delineated in, it uses the intro that we took away. So can you just say above, delineated above?
But that's gonna be 420.51, isn't that?
Two. I
But
mean, 'cause
yeah,
we took it
but,
all out of 520.
well, I mean, what he's modified is he's modified 420.51.
Right.
And so that still does exist. And so really that reference to 420.51 is correct. It's just the new 420.51.
Okay. It doesn't really, yeah, I guess that's fine. It just doesn't really, to me, it didn't say as many characteristics as you've got listed just right above. So anyway, you might look at that, see if it needs, it may not need
Gotcha.
amending.
Yeah, I feel like delineated is a strong way to characterize
Okay.
425.1. It's more of a paragraph in the list.
Arnie, on the, just picking up on the character development, is there anything, or how do we talk about environmentally sensitive design? What does that mean?
And that's a good question. There's a number of these that I would probably recommend that you did not get rid of, delete, repeal, simply because if we're focused on those two areas that I just mentioned, I'm thinking about areas that really don't have natural resources that need to be protected. We're talking parking lots already. We're talking built out areas. We have one or two parcels that actually don't have anything on them, but it's certainly not an environmentally sensitive or a resource that needs protection. So you might want to reconsider, now I'm trying to find it again, sorry, environmentally sensitive areas. Is that something you want to promote? Again, we're talking about areas that are largely built out, and is that even a character that needs to be brought out?
Well, I like the wording and I think we need to define it a bit. Sorry, environmentally sensitive design, because I was thinking, well, does that include tree plantings, bioswales, ways of, reducing runoff? I mean, how do we begin to talk about that in a larger scale development?
And I appreciate that observation. One thing that I was thinking is maybe you want to put something more about energy efficiency in the buildings themselves, that sort of portion of the environment. But you could certainly, as you're suggesting, have, and I cannot think of the appropriate way to sort of characterize it, the environmentally sensitive stormwater measures or something to that effect, and also improved building efficiencies, or
Yeah, and contributing to the tree canopy of Lexington.
Right.
Yeah,
I think it's good.
yeah, I think we should definitely keep it in there because theoretically in the future, there could be new opportunity zones that have more trees.
And I like the vagueness of it because it does encompass all of that.
Should we go through just quickly, and maybe that's all we get to is just to hit those characteristics A through K to see yay or nay, or if something needs to be worked on.
Yep, but I would, don't know, you tell me the best place to put it, but on the open space, the word I wrote in the margin is publicly accessible space. And I'm just, and you'll then, going back to the characteristics of development, we have parks and open space as amenities. So it might be already covered, but I just, it's this notion that, do we want to encourage publicly accessible open space in new developments? And that's done by design. That yes, you're welcome into this part of our new development, not necessarily in the private areas, but in the semi-public areas. So
Is that a suggestion to add publicly accessible to D, parks and open space in some manner?
yes, to be, yes.
I like that.
I like it in theory. It's just somebody's private property. I'm not, I don't know.
There are whole programs where you actually, I mean, you get some, we're not doing that here. We took out the bonuses for open space. But there are examples of where you could get more height or more density if you had more open space. We're taking that out. I'm just trying to say that it's something that can be encouraged. And either it's here or it's more in the character of development. Whether or not, I mean, private property, not a 3-acre site is not going to be entirely private. It will be public access points.
My thought, I agree with what Leslie's saying, because I was imagining a building that kind of has 3 sides and a courtyard in the middle that is still park and open space, but it may not be public. What if the first sentence of 425 5.2, the goal of plan unit development, blah, 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 and is different from conventional suburban development by providing many of the following characteristics. That way, it's not like a checklist. They have to do A through K.
Oh,
It's-
yeah, I agree with that.
That's good.
That way we can keep what John's suggestion was.
And the way I have John's suggestion on D is just simply adding to the beginning, publicly accessible parks and open space as amenities.
That's good, Arnie. Thank you.
I think everybody's okay with pedestrian orientation.
Mhm.
Wow, that's an assumption, sorry. Is everybody? 2 neighborhood friendly streets and paths. And of course, we don't know exactly what this means, but presumably it means some trees, some benches, bike rack. We've already, C, interconnected streets and transportation networks, which is what I think you would want in a more urban area. So you don't have to go out on the main street, go down 50 feet and then come back into a development. D, we've covered. E, neighborhood centers, and that can mean a number of different things, but at least an area where you have some ability to have commercial along with the residential. So some of your needs will be met. And we're talking about areas, except for the East Lexington opportunity area, we're talking about areas that are already, for the most part, commercially oriented and would be a neighborhood center, particularly if we added residences to it. Any heartburn about neighborhood centers? F, buildings and spaces of appropriate scale. We'll have to determine what that is, but
Yeah, that's a-
we'll have maximum heights and whatnot later on. A relegated parking, I really don't know what that means. Relegated to underneath the building, relegated to the back of the building. We'll have to figure out if we need some more meat on that particular parking that is shielded, parking that is appropriately screened. I don't know if any of that jumps out at you, and perhaps if you, maybe that's our homework assignment, is to come back with alternate language if you so choose for the next meeting on just these.
And Screened is a
Characters.
pretty good word. But
Me- Personally, I like keeping A through K vague enough because we're kind of trying to inspire creativity and at a conceptual level, not necessarily the design level.
mhm.
For H, mixture of uses and use types. I, mixture of housing types and affordability. And then J, environmentally sensitive design that we've already sort of covered, and I have to go back and listen to exactly what we said. But changing that, maybe adding a little bit about trees, stormwater type, nature-based stormwater facilities. I can't remember what that term is. And then maybe also adding something about higher energy efficiency in the new buildings themselves. And then the last one being clear boundaries with any surrounding rural areas, which you could probably strike.
Oh, just in case East Lex it works
Oh,
in, maybe
true.
just keep it in for now.
Say that or
Yeah, if we add the word many to that sentence, then it kind of gives us some space.
Okay. And I'll just maybe task you if you come up with any alternate language, something that you like better than what we have there, or a whole other idea, please let me know and we'll weave it into the next packet.
Do we need rural in there or just can you clear boundaries with any surrounding areas?
We're trying to weave this into and not necessarily make it sort of separate. And I think the idea is if you have a rural area, you want to have a clear separation in that particular case. And we really don't have that many true rural areas unless you sort of get out to East Lex and then look at the surrounding properties that are in the county at that point, and maybe not so much the ones that are remaining in the city.
But what would clear boundaries imply?
A distinction that when you travel down the street, you know when you're in this mixed use development thing and you know when you're not.
Think about that.
I think that is our time on this particular agenda item. Thanks, Arnie. Thanks,
Can I
everyone.
throw out two comments, just so you could look at for next meeting, because otherwise I will forget them. On the density section, it says, it lists the density at not to exceed 20 dwelling units per acre, which I don't think makes sense. And we have plenty of development, multifamily that exceed that already. And there was one other, and then on page 6 of 12, when it's talking about, it says you will have a environmental impact study and traffic study. And if we can, I think we talked about this before, if we could kind of make that, if needed, based on project size, kind of work that into that, because not every project will need those. Sorry, I will forget by next meeting.
Thank you. And I'll piggyback onto that, page 412 or page 14 overall. Building height. I think I've said this every meeting. I'm interested in height versus elevation. Because in that East Lex area, we have up on Summit Square, it gets pretty darn high. And I don't know if it's fair to hold those. It's just a nuance to be explored.
I'll just say I've never seen a regulation in the zoning ordinance that says there's a maximum height, but it may be different if you're higher or lower than people around you. So I wouldn't know how to write that or enforce that.
And maybe we can't. It's just pretty staggering how high that place is compared to Kroger.
Now, if I could just go back to the 20 dwelling units per acre, what is it that you would like? I know that because our zoning code is written in such a way that the lot requirements table gives you a calculation. It doesn't give you a flat dwelling units per acre. So would you like maybe a comparison of some of the developments that we have?
Like to just scratch it and put a period after comprehensive plan.
And I would strongly suggest that it's not left entirely to the city council to decide the density.
Okay, so we'll have to figure out
We'll have to figure
something.
that one out.
And otherwise, I'll just bring it back onto your next agenda. 2 weeks time.
Yeah, and Arnie, my note in the margin is, since we're doing this, is this a chance to look at how we can strengthen the review process? And I don't have the answer, and I don't have the review process, but as a goal to strengthen the review process and maybe look at how other jurisdictions have done it.
Any other
Effective-
comments?
Effectively, not, we're not trying to create roadblocks. You're just trying to create a good review process.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Let's move on to item number 6, other business. Arnie, do we have any fun tales for planning and zoning these days?
Is that where the zoning report is? Zoning report? Design review team members, which are police, fire, building, and myself and Public Works, reviewed a site plan submittal for 8 Tesla charging stations at Sheets. And we've done the first review, made comments, and it's going back. And that's one of our items that if it doesn't meet code, we don't bring it to you. So that makes your ministerial portion of the approval easier. I don't know if that'll be back for you next time. It kind of depends on how quickly they make their changes and if additional changes are required after that. Public Works is working on amendments to our GIS site, which includes the institutional overlay layer. So that's why you haven't seen that be amended yet to reflect what's actually in the institutional overlay. We also listened to a USDOT webinar regarding grants for reconnecting communities. I don't believe any of that's going to really apply to us. Those are for communities that have had a rail line or an interstate actually dissect and separate communities from other parts of, and particularly communities of color. And there's some pretty decent sized money attached to that, but I don't think we're going to be able to avail ourselves of that particular grant.
So don't we have that in the bypass? Isn't that a road, the highway that's dividing communities per se?
Communities, yes, but disadvantaged communities, communities of color, the way I listened and what I think I heard is that would not, they're also, and I don't have it with me, there's I think it's only a 50% budget match. And I think the minimum project has to be like $5 million. So there's nothing on our CIP that meets those requirements that I'm aware of. And then enforcement of some of the short-term rentals continues to be a bit strained. Just to pass that along. That's all I have for a zoning report.
Thanks, Arnie. Catalyst project updates. Kind of go down the list at your leisure. If any of us have any updates?
I wanted to ask Arnie, why is it strained?
We continue to have a number consistently that are either not abiding or we don't think they're abiding, or if they're trying to make changes, they're just being difficult in updating their particular short-term rental. As an example, I had a 40-minute conversation yesterday with one particular gentleman who wants to maximize the potential of his return through short-term rentals, and therefore is trying to figure out every which way, backwards, forwards, and sideways on how to have all of the rooms in his house rented, but doesn't have the parking spaces on his property and hasn't up to now, but I think he will have his life safety issues sorted out shortly. But it's sometimes you just have to spend a lot of time with certain folks because they're trying to maximize what they can do in the short-term rentals. And then sometimes that sort of gets us beyond what at least I think our intent was with the short-term rentals. And to be perfectly frank, I think also we're having more problems when the property owner is not there. So the type B rentals where you can rent up to 45 nights and not be there at all, I think that's causing some issues. I'm not saying that we necessarily need to reevaluate, but I'm just making you aware that some of that is difficult to enforce.
Yeah, I was asking now specifically, is there anything that we can do to clarify or respond? It doesn't sound like there is. I hope that you, going forward, just keep that in mind. I don't like to hear that there's strain, especially related to something that we did.
Well, I just bring it up as for you to keep in mind that, yes, we have done something and it's causing a few issues here and there. We can get into the specifics, but would you like at some point for that to be investigated a little bit further and maybe proposed amendments brought back? Staff is not able to do text amendments. They either have to come from planning commission or council as far as direction. So it's not, I don't think we're at the point that we need to do that. Just sort of wanting to keep you updated. Chickens are great. Short-term rentals.
You were,
Yeah,
when you were mentioning the charging stations, that you said that's something that we would have to make a decision on, or no?
It's not quite ready for you because site plans are something that we don't bring to you until it meets all of our requirements. So Public Works is looking at it, the fire building official, even though we don't have building plans, but just to make sure that there's nothing missing there. So once we bring it to you, it meets city standards and development standards in particular, and therefore you should have something that you can approve.
And then I mean, I had a question just generally about the charging stations. Are they just for Teslas or are they for electric vehicles in general?
Tesla's an interesting case, and I don't have an electric vehicle, but I've been reading up a little bit. Level 1 and level 2, if you have a Tesla Powerwall at your house, you can buy an adapter and charge other ones that have a JT 1772. I'm not telling you the exact one, but then you can have adapters that work with a lot of other cars. My understanding at this time is the Tesla Super Charging Center. I didn't name that correctly, but the one that's going to be going in at Sheets, they currently do not have an adapter that works with other vehicles. So that level 3 charger where you can charge up to 80% in 20 minutes or whatever it is, currently they do not. Now, as I recall, Mr. Musk, as of early last summer, promised that there would be a adapter so that other folks could use. And ultimately, I think it's always been their goal to have their charging stations used by others. It's just sort of a proprietary
when we
thing.
get to that, I'm probably going to abstain on
just for clarity, I recommend you use your discretion in terms of when short-term rentals text amendments come back to us. My sense is that it's number 23 on the top 10 list. Any Catalyst project updates?
Short update on the green infrastructure group. We've broken down into smaller subgroups: bicycle, pedestrian, trees and open space, environmental resiliency, health and recreation. Since I've been back from my trip, I've been working with each of those groups to clarify their write-ups. We have a template, so it's just a matter of people sitting down and brainstorming a bit on that. But at one point, I've recommended to the group that we finish it up. I think we're ready. And so it's just a matter of getting everybody to write down something and then editing it into a document. So.
Thanks, John. Key annual PC milestones. I welcome any other thoughts on items A through E. Comp plan review, and it's been ongoing for some time. Now that some time has passed, do we feel satisfied by that? Do we need to take any action?
Quick comment, Jamie. I think you could take it off here because it really is something we had built it in. into the calendar that we would look at it in September or October, whatever would be the proper time to look at it. So I think it's an annual review. I think we all discussed it the last time. We have to maybe perfect how we do the annual review, but it's an annual review.
Thanks for that clarity, John. And I'm cool with striking it from the agenda as well.
Before we go on, so we're at the city council report. Before we get to that, I want to, when does what we've done earlier with regard to all of the CPAs and ZOAs and all that MPAs, when does that go to city council?
The WNL items are going to be placed on hold for just a little bit. If I remember the schedule correctly, there's going to be a work session for council on the 2nd at 5:30.
That's right.
Work session, what does that mean?
WNL is going to come before council at a work session 5:30 on the 2nd of June and more fully describe what's in their comprehensive plan or their campus master plan. Sorry, I keep making those mistakes. So give them more background on each individual capital project as an example, so they have a better understanding. I mean, you've been working on this for quite a while, have had WNL in front of you a few times and may have a better understanding of what's in those capital projects. So this is, not to use the words get up to speed, but to provide some background for council on what is in that fairly lengthy document. And then
Yeah.
after that, I believe I've been directed to provide council with a more full discussion on what your recommendation is and maybe some finer zoning points to go along with that. And then at some point in that, I believe we're going to even request council let us know on the June 2nd work session when they would like to have an advertised public hearing.
Okay.
I'm not sure when the advertised public hearing for city council will be. And just as an aside, they're also scheduling with the public hearings that need to occur for the sale of the Spotswood property. So I think council has to figure out how much pain they want to have in one particular evening, or do they want to spread that pain around?
And the work session, was that requested by city council?
So I believe it was.
And at some point, there was the question raised if PC would be involved with that work session. And my understanding is no.
I have not heard about, I believe it's, as I've heard it, it's for council to have a more thorough understanding of what's in the campus master plan. So I've not heard of planning commission specifically being invited. They did want to at least hold off on having that work session until you were done and finalized with your recommendations. So they were at least taking that into account.
Will our recommendations, they won't be official until the next meeting when we approve our minutes, right? Or are they official now?
You've made your motions and
So
recommendations.
those are going to be public. Okay.
Cool. One thing I would add to key annual PC milestones, many of you may know this, but my term is up on the planning commission the end of next month. And that will be it for me, at least for the foreseeable future. So be in recruitment mode.
We'll miss you, Jamie.
Yeah, this is, I'm not one to flatter people. This has been like one of the top 2 or 3 most rewarding professional experiences for me, for sure. So I really appreciate it, hanging out with y'all and learning from each of you.
You've done a great job as chair.
Yep, you've done a great job as chair. It was especially in these last meetings.
Yeah, I finally understand enough now that I'm leaving, so. Yeah. All right, city council report.
I have, but maybe one more, and it might be tied in your city council, but under that, I would like to suggest that in the future, at some point, we put on our agenda a discussion of Spotswood. And in regards to comments that were made, I think by council and by the city manager, that once the developer was picked, then we could be talking about the type of development and et cetera. What isn't clear to me is what latitude we even have to influence the development. the actual physical development in terms of our comp plan or any zoning. So that I would just, at the appropriate time that we could have a session where maybe Arnie, you could help us understand, do we have any latitude as the planning commission in our recommendations to the council as to how that property should be developed? And I will say, I think we have very little.
Yeah, I would say it's through our regular processes, plan review and
Unless council specifically invites you to make a recommendation, but it's not, what is it based on? So typically you have an application, some sort of proposal in front of you. So, and you will see that, you will see either a conditional use permit or rezoning. I believe it's going to be a conditional use permit. You're going to see a site plan. And so you will have something in front of you. But the question I believe you're asking is, will you have any input before that? And that's only at the request of council.
Okay, I'm just going back to what Jim noted in the paper. I'm going back to that quote. And I was a little confused because I'm used to what is the normal process. I was trying to understand whether any additional opportunities for us to comment on the design as he noted in the paper or not. So,
All righty, Leslie.
sure. City Council met last Thursday and we unanimously approved or they did, I didn't participate. They unanimously approved the CUP to allow the former Beta House to be used as office space as was recommended by y'all and by Planning Commission. And they unanimously approved the zoning ordinance amendment to replace accessory dwelling with accessory apartment. The FY23 budget and CIP were approved. And then Arnie talked about the work session next meeting with WNL, and that's at 5:30. And then also at the next meeting, City Council will have a public hearing on the Spotswood purchase contract. Likely, you never know what'll happen, but likely no action will be taken at that meeting. It'll be voted on at the following meeting. And that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Great. Well, we are at number
Yeah,
8.
can I ask, with the format of the work session for city council, is it same as our format when we have work session? There's no public, it's an information only, public, no public comment.
Right, generally, once in a while, we've allowed public comment, but yes, it's more of a discussion between council and WNL.
There will certainly, as you know, be public hearings.
Yeah.
To follow.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
yay.
Great. Have a good
Yes.
night, y'all.
Thank you all.
I do miss just a tiny bit not breaking down the.
Everything, the whole hall.
Sort of a.
Well, my understanding is, as far as I know,